So we're going to start to talk about something called extension sequencing. And specifically, we're going to look at, in this video, talking through the establishment of that through high to high or low to low sequences. So this is just the initiation and the focused area on what exactly you're looking for in order for these sequences to take shape. There will be a part 2 of this video that covers the sequence as it unfolds, but this first initial portion is focused primarily on looking at the establishment of that run, of that extension. So typically, the way that this works is when you have a fib and you've got Fibonacci retracements, you come down to the 50 and this, or in between the 50 and the 61.8, and you expect to run up to the negative 23.6, and then from there you fall out and start to retrace back, and with that you're given a new area to look for an entry because you know your sequencing is working well in the traditional sense. This goes down the path of fib validation. So anything from here forward moving up out of this zone is going to be a validated fib because you know it starts from a solid point. What you're getting with fib extensions is if we get a sequence that starts off like this, it needs to be very exact. And in this case, we're looking at specifically the 50. But if we get a retracement that comes back to the 50, I'm going to be very closely watching what happens here. Because Fibonacci extensions are instantiated when you get a clean 50% retracement. And then as you travel up to the negative 23.6, you get an extension up past it. So this, anywhere within the sequence, kicks off the initiation of a Fibonacci extension. And you're looking at extension sequencing. Now, what I mean by this can happen anywhere is you can have a sequence that's already in flight, right? You can have a retracement down to the 61.8. You can then have a retracement down to the 50. And then from there, if you push past this negative 23.6, well, now you're kicking off an extension sequence. But although this can happen anywhere from within an existing sequence, this can also be the first instance, right? Like this can just not be here at all. So this can be the first iteration and the first opportunity that you see to have something in there. And additionally, while this can happen anywhere, it needs a very specific set of circumstances in order to kick off. You need a clean 50% retracement. Something like this that brings you down to the 61.8 and comes out of that. Not only is this no longer, or is this not a valid extension sequence, this is also a no longer validated fib because we're falling outside of the confines of completing this sequence. So to get back to the original point, if we come back and we clear our set of circumstances that are necessary in order for us to move beyond just a traditional sequence, we get our clean 50, and then we push up past the negative 23.6. I'll remove this for clarity purposes. Well, now, this is still viable. We can 100% still do this. However, there's now a new opportunity that we have from within this movement. We now have a high to high or a low to low. Now what this means is you take, and I'll slow that down and explain my reasoning in a minute. You take the high that creates this leg. So if you think about legs on a Fibonacci sequence, you have your point A, your point B, your point C, and your point D. Now, we use that for clarity purposes. So your B to C leg, the connecting point between your A to B and your B to C, this high is now your new high, right? Instead of using our anchor here, our anchor is actually going to be the high. And you're going to use this new area that you run off at and that you top out at as your other high, right? So your high to high. And then you're coming back and watching what's happening here. Now, this happens also low to low, where if we start up high, and we come back down, and we look for our bearish retracement, we've got our clean 50. Coming out of that, we push through our negative 23.6. Our next move is a low to low. So we look at our A, B, point B, B to C. So we grab our point B and we bring this down. And we look for that retracement coming back to the negative 61.8. Now we'll get into the actual sequencing portion of this in the next video, because this, as it's currently constitute, if you're following specific risk guidelines, and typically for me, this is not tradable. This needs to kind of work itself out, and you can get yourself 2 to 3 good trades out of an extension sequence. However, this first test is not tradable. You're just looking for the instantiation of this extension sequence to hold. So obviously the next move that you'd be looking for is something like this. Now, this said, and we'll get into this in the next video, but this doesn't need to be clean on the 50. This can come up to the 61.8 and do this and still be valid. So if this happens, your sequence is still valid. It's just on your first retracement that this 50 has to happen. Now, this 50 also doesn't have to happen at that particular point. This clean 50 only needs to happen somewhere on your sequencing. So for instance, if we have this movement, and then we start to come back down, as long as this 50 is clean at some point in a valid sequence, then something like this will work. Where if we come down and hit the 61.8 this time, and then we start to, and we push upward. Let me clear this out and just make it all one line. And we do this, then our next move can 100% be this. The only time that this doesn't work is if this is either not clean, right, and on either of the levels, and we're somewhere in the middle, or if we push down and invalidate it this way, or if we front run it and come up top. If we test either of these levels cleanly, then this is a valid anchor point for our high to high, all because this 50 happened here. Again, if this 60 me clear this off. If this 61.8, not that one, if this 61.8 is the level that gets tested, and we come back down towards this test here, then this is not a valid extension sequence. We can't do anything with this. This is not valid because we and nowhere in this sequence have a clean 50% retracement. That needs to happen because that kicks off all the algorithmic trading that's happening behind the scenes. So again, shortened criteria. What we need is at some point a clean 50% retracement. And then from there, no matter when in this sequence it happens, moving through the negative 23.6 allows us the opportunity to take this point B and use that as our anchor and bring that up to the new high. So this is going to take some practice and this is going to take some getting used to. So watch this video a few times and really try to dig deep and understand the complexities behind creating a valid sequence in order for you to start to leverage that as a high to high, low to low extension sequence.